Which defenses should you target and who should you avoid for Week 16 of the NFL season? We'll go over all of that in this week's episode of Pick 3 DST. As a reminder, these are not my full weekly DST rankings. If you want to check those out, you can click the link below, which will update as the week goes on and we get weather updates and injury concerns and things of that nature. As always, we are going to start our video with our accountability check and what was another pretty solid performance for the video and also for the article, where we had 6 of the top 10 defenses in a row for the 3rd straight week. So again, make sure you click that article as the week goes on. Our sleeper defense for last week, the Houston Texans scored 15 points against the Miami Dolphins and finished as the 5th ranked defense on the week. The defense we faded as a top 10 option, the New York Jets, scored 6 points against the Jaguars and finished as the 17th ranked defense on the week. Our stud defense, the Philadelphia Eagles, scored 8 points, which was enough to sneak them into the top 10, so not an elite performance, however, not one that hurts you in your fantasy leagues. However, our stud defense, the Washington Commanders, scored just 6 points against a banged-up Saints offense. So again, that's not a point total that really hurt you, but it didn't really help you, and so we kind of missed the boat on that one. But we'll try to hit a solid 4 for 4 for the fantasy football playoff semifinals here in Week 16. My sleeper defense for Week 16 is the Indianapolis Colts. Consensus has them down at 14th, but they are my 4th ranked defense on the week. Now, we've been stashing the Colts for a few weeks now because of their juicy Week 16 and 17 schedule, and now we finally get to reap the rewards of that. Over the last 2 months, the Colts rank 4th in tackles for a loss or no gain per game. They rank 7th in EPA allowed per play. That's expected points added allowed per play, which tracks the explosiveness explosive plays that a defense allows an offense to get. They rank 10th in the NFL in turnover rate. That's only led to 6.4 fantasy points per game over the last 8 weeks, but that's been a pretty solid overall defense, and then a total fantasy point total that puts them just outside of the top 10. However, they get a matchup against the Titans, a team that gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing defenses over the last month and has given up the most fantasy points per game to opposing defenses on the year. So this is a smash spot matchup any way you want it against a Colts defense that's been a pretty strong pass defense all year long. There's a chance that the Titans may turn to Mason Rudolph since they did bench Will Levis last week, and that makes them a slightly worse matchup, but not a matchup we're running from at all. So I think the Colts are a defense that's poised to put up a really strong performance here. I have them firmly locked into my top 10. Before we get to my solid defense of the week, pause this video and comment below. Let me know which defense you're rolling with this week, or ask me any start-sit questions, and I'll get to those as the week goes on. My solid defense for Week 16 is the Philadelphia Eagles. Consensus has them down at 11th, but they are my top-ranked defense on the week, and that's because there's no defense that I feel more sure of right now putting up at least a solid performance than the Philadelphia Eagles. Over the last 2 months, the Eagles average 8.1 fantasy points per game. They rank 1st in the NFL in opponent scoring rate, 1st in expected points added allowed per play, 5th in turnover rate, and 5th in their pass rush productivity grade. The Commanders have also allowed 14 sacks over their last 3 games. So I really like that matchup with the Eagles pass rush. Considering you are in a win or go home situation right now in the fantasy football playoff semifinals, I think playing a defense like the Eagles that feels like the safest defense in all of fantasy football makes a ton of sense right now. I have the Eagles ranked 1st, not because I think they're a lock to put up the most points, but because I think that they are a lock to be the safest defense on the board. I think 6, 7, 8, 9 points feels incredibly safe from them. And so I would much rather play the Eagles than a trendy streaming defense like, say, the Falcons. The Falcons are ranked higher than the Eagles in pretty much all consensus rankings, but the Ravens only scored 5 fantasy points against the Giants last week, and the Ravens have been a better fantasy defense than the Falcons all year long. So I can't really see myself playing the Falcons against the Giants and sitting the Eagles when I know what I'm getting from the Eagles defense, and it's pretty solid production week in and week out. My stud defense for the week is the Denver Broncos. Consensus has them at 9th, and they are my 3rd ranked defense on the week. The Broncos have been a really solid fantasy defense the whole season, and they have been great over the last 2 months as well. Over that span, they rank 3rd in EPA allowed per play, 4th in turnover rate, 4th in pass rush productivity rate, 5th in tackles for a loss or no gain per game, and 7th in opponent scoring rate. That has led to them averaging 10.3 fantasy points per game over the last 2 months. That's 2nd in all of fantasy football. So that is elite production. They're going up against a Chargers team that has been a matchup we haven't usually liked to attack with our defenses. However, they have not been the same team since J.K. Dobbins has gotten hurt. Without Dobbins, the Chargers are not able to control the ball on the ground. They've had to throw the ball a lot more, and that has led to a few more turnovers, but far more sacks. Justin Herbert has taken 15 sacks in the last 4 games. And considering we just talked about this Denver Broncos pass rush productivity rate, that doesn't really set up for a strong performance from the Chargers on a short week against the Broncos team that is looking to shore up their playoff spot. I really think the Broncos defense are in for a solid performance here. They've been one of my most trusted defenses all year, and so I'm trusting them to take me to a fantasy football title game. The defense I'm fading for Week 16 of the NFL season is the Arizona Cardinals. Consensus has them up at 6th, and they are my 21st ranked defense on the week. The Cardinals were one of the trendiest fantasy football playoff stashes over the last few weeks. People were really rushing to try to get them on their roster. However, they've really disappointed in 2+ matchups over the last 2 weeks, and they're also averaging just 5.5 fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks. Over the last 2 months, they do rank 9th in pass rush productivity rate. However, they also rank 16th in EPA per play allowed, 17th in opponent scoring rate, and 28th in turnover rate. So they have not been a good fantasy football defense, and I really can't play them against the Panthers in most formats. This Panthers offense, before putting up a really poor performance against the Cowboys last week, was really hard on fantasy football defenses over the last 6 weeks. Now, over the last 6 weeks, including that Dallas Cowboys game, the Panthers have allowed 8 turnovers and 12 sacks. They allowed 4 turnovers and 6 sacks last week against the Cowboys. So half of those stats have come in just 1 game. So I'm really not going to overlook what the Panthers did in the 5 weeks before that Cowboys game, and that was against some solid defenses like the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Bucks, and the Saints. They had been playing much better football with Bryce Young back under center, and even though last week was not good, I'm going to say that the Panthers are a little bit kind of in between what we saw last week and what they were doing the past 6 weeks, and so they're not a matchup we want to avoid, but they're also not a smash spot matchup anymore, and this Cardinals defense has not been good, and they have not delivered in good matchups, and so I can't trust them with a shot at the fantasy football title on the line, so I'm going to be fading the Cardinals this week. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Pick 3 DST. As a reminder, click the link below to check out my full weekly rankings, which I'll update as the week goes on. Hit that like and subscribe button below to get all of our fantasy football content and football content over at NBC Sports. And I'll check you back next week for our final episode of Pick 3 DST. Good luck on Sunday.